All right, let's dive into something that drives people who work with technology absolutely crazy. Why does expensive outdoor gear fail so often? It's rarely for the reasons you'd think. Instead, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible environmental forces, these hidden enemies that are constantly at war with our tech.
So think about it for a sec. A brand new, high-end security camera on a light pole just dies. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Somebody smashed it? Was it a defective unit from the factory? Maybe a random power surge? Well, yeah, those things happen. But they are not the #1 killer. Not even close.
It turns out the biggest threats are the ones you can't even see. They're these silent, invisible forces of nature. So, in this explainer, we're going to expose 4 of these environmental enemies, and more importantly, show you exactly how the pros fight back.
Okay, our first enemy is literally right under our feet, the ground. I mean, it seems totally stable, reliable, the ultimate 0 point for electricity, right? But here's the secret. Over a long distance, the ground can lie, and it creates all sorts of electrical chaos.
If you're a tech, you have definitely seen this. You've got a camera that works perfectly on your workbench, but the second you install it 500 feet away on a pole, you get these weird, ghostly bars rolling through the video. Or maybe it just decides to reboot itself for no reason at all. It's not a ghost in the machine, it's just physics.
And this slide right here breaks down the problem perfectly. See, we all assume ground means 0 volts, period. But the ground connection at your building might be a true 0, while the ground way out at that pole could actually be sitting at, say, 5 volts. So what happens when you connect those 2 different points with a metal cable? Well, you've essentially just created a tiny, unwanted battery. Nature hates that imbalance, so it sends a current right down your data line to try and fix it. That, my friends, is a ground loop.
So how do you beat this thing? Well, the really elegant fix is a simple little device called an isolation transformer. It lets the data signal pass through magnetically, but it physically breaks the electrical connection. Problem solved. But if you want the nuclear option, the one that is absolutely guaranteed to work every time, use fiber optic cable. It's made of glass. It can't conduct electricity. It's totally immune. Game over.
All right, let's move on to enemy number 2, and this one comes from the sky. Now, we're not talking about a direct lightning strike. I mean, obviously, that's game over. We're talking about its ghost, a nearby strike that can completely destroy your equipment without ever even touching it.
This is so important, you really have to let it sink in. A lightning bolt can hit the ground a quarter mile away and still fry your entire system. So how is that even possible? Well, the answer is a pretty fascinating little principle of physics.
And this explains it perfectly. It's called induction. When that lightning bolt hits, it creates this colossal magnetic field that expands and collapses in a fraction of a second. Your long copper cable running out to the pole, it acts like a giant antenna. And that collapsing magnetic field induces a huge voltage spike right onto that wire, sending it rocketing towards your delicate electronics. So the defense strategy here is absolutely crucial, and it has 2 parts. You can't skip one. First, you need a surge protector, something like a gas discharge tube, right there at the camera to take the first hit. But you also have to have a second one back at your main switch or recorder to catch whatever energy still gets through. One at each end, every single time, no exceptions.
All right, on to enemy number 3. Now this one is completely predictable. It happens every single day, and yet it's responsible for countless hours of totally useless security footage. I am talking, of course, about the sun.
It's the simplest analogy, and it's 100% accurate. A camera's sensor is just like a digital retina. If you point it straight at the sun, it gets completely overwhelmed. The pixels just saturate with light, creating this giant white blob that makes it impossible to see anything else in the shot. And no, that fancy wide dynamic range feature they advertise, it can't fix this. It's just too much light.
So how do we fix this one? Well, it's not about expensive tech. It's about basic planning and a little bit of geometry. In the Northern Hemisphere, at least, pointing a camera east or west is just the worst-case scenario. You get completely blinded at sunrise and sunset. Pointing it south is also bad because your subjects are backlit all day long, turning them into dark, hard-to-identify silhouettes. That leaves north. North is the golden direction. The sun is always behind the camera, which means your scene is perfectly and evenly lit all day long.
But hey, what if you have to watch something that's to the west? You don't have a choice, right? Well, here's the pro tip. You mount the camera as high as you possibly can and then tilt it down at a really steep angle. By doing that, the camera's own little built-in sunshield, that little plastic eyebrow it has, can actually physically block the sun when it's right on the horizon, saving your shot. It's a low-tech fix, but it works. Okay, this brings us to our fourth and final invisible enemy. And this is one that you create yourself, with the best of intentions. You take all your expensive electronics and you put them in a tough, weatherproof box to keep them safe. But what you've accidentally done is built a trap. You've built a hidden oven. It's basically the greenhouse effect in a little metal box. You've got two sources of heat. First, the electronics themselves. The network switch, the power supply, they're all generating heat. Second, you have the sun beating down on the outside of that box all day. A sealed enclosure just traps all of that heat inside, and the temperature can just skyrocket.
And you might be thinking, well, how hot can it really get? Get a load of this number. On a hot but pretty normal 90-degree summer day, the temperature inside that sealed box can hit 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to cook an egg. Your equipment doesn't stand a chance. Hard drives fail, processors slow down, and the whole system just dies from heat exhaustion. You are literally cooking your gear.
Luckily, the solutions are actually pretty straightforward. First, color. It really matters. A white or light-colored box will reflect a ton of solar energy, while a black box just soaks it up. Second, get some air moving. Vents, especially with fans, create a little chimney effect that pulls cool air in the bottom and pushes hot air out the top. And third, you can use a sun shield. It's basically a double skin, an outer layer that takes the direct hit from the sun, leaving a gap of air to keep the inner box cool. So, as you can see, putting technology outside isn't just a matter of plugging things in and hoping for the best. It's really about understanding and, outsmarting these invisible forces. It's about mastering the environment itself. So let's just recap real quick. We took on the deceptive ground, and we defeated it by isolating the current. We faced the lightning's ghost, and we won by diverting its energy. We outsmarted the blinding sun by just facing the right direction. And we beat the hidden oven by simply letting the heat escape. 4 enemies, 4 pretty elegant solutions. And that really brings us to the final thought here. Yeah, we've been focused on security tech, but these exact same principles apply everywhere. So the question I want to leave you with is this. What invisible forces, heat, electricity, radiation, are silently working against the technology in your life? And what can you do to fight back? Thanks for watching.